Hi, and welcome to Art with Mrs. Torres. Today we're going to be drawing one of my absolute favorite birds. This is called the Western Scrub Jay. Well, actually, they changed the name just recently, and now they call him the California Scrub Jay. We have an oak tree in our backyard, and we get so many of these scrub jays, and they are noisy. Can you hear them? So they are so they are waiting for me to go put peanuts in the branches. I put peanuts in the branches. They come down every day. They take those peanuts, they fly off, they hide them in the nooks and crannies of our oak trees. Listen. He's like saying, I'm hungry. Where are my peanuts? And then they eat them later in the winter time when it's cold. Okay, I'm going to go feed those guys so they'll quiet down so I can teach you how to draw our Western California scrub jay.
Okay, let's get ready to draw our California scrub jay. So this is a photograph of a scrub jay, and I found this just on the internet, and I love this picture. You can see his beautiful colors. A couple things I want to point out about a scrub jay that's different than other types of jays is that he has a gray patch of feathers around his eye. He has a gray patch of feathers right here on his back. He has a blue section right here. They call this his necklace. Kind of does look like he has a necklace on. He's got a blue section of feathers here. He's got white underneath his chin and his stomach. And then I want you to notice his beak. His beak is a little bit wider than other birds' beaks, and that's because California jays eat oak nuts, and we get those from our oak trees. And the nut is very large. The acorn is very large, and so they take that wide beak, they hold that nut in their beak, and then they crack it very hard by tapping their beak onto the nut. So he needs to have a really wide beak. It's got a tiny little curve to it. You see that? All right, so for our lesson today, we are going to be drawing our version of our California jay or Western scrub jay. We are going to be using a piece of watercolor paper if you have that. Now, if you don't have watercolor paper, you could just use regular paper and color with crayons or colored pencils. But for me, I'm going to be using a piece of watercolor paper today. I'm going to also need a pencil. You're going to need a marker. I'm going to be using my Sharpie marker. You're going to need a magic eraser for erasing. And of course, something to color with. I'm going to be using my watercolor paint set. Any watercolor paint set will work. If you don't have watercolors, as I mentioned, you could do it with crayons, colored pencils, markers, whatever you've got laying around the house. Now, if you are going to be painting today, you are going to need some water. So you're going to get a little jar or cup of water, a bowl of water, whatever you've got. And of course, a napkin, and that way we can blot our paintbrush as we are painting. So go ahead and pause the video, and you're going to gather up the items that you need: paper, pencil, Sharpie marker, and eraser, something for coloring, so either paints or crayons. And if you are going to be painting, don't forget some water and a paper towel. Meet me back here in a few minutes and we will begin our lesson. Welcome back. So we've got our paper. We're going to put our paper horizontal. That way we have room to draw this long tail, especially on our Western scrub jay. So let's get our pencil and our magic rubber eraser. That's all you need right now for working. And the first thing we're going to be doing is finding the center of our paper. So I'm going to set my paper here, and I'm going to find the center by putting my finger there. Once I have found the center, I'm going to make a small dot for the center. This is going to help spread out my bird evenly as I'm drawing my jay. You'll notice he's got a oval body or a circle. He's got a very long tail, so we have to save room for that tail. He's got a circle for his head, and then we're going to save room for that beak. So we're going to start by finding the center of the paper. I'm going to draw the oval for his body first. So I'm just going to take my pencil and draw a medium-sized circle or oval for the body. Now, I have mine kind of tilted this way, but it's okay if yours is tilted this way. It doesn't matter. It just depends on how he's standing on the branch. Then I'm going to come up here to the front, and I'm going to add a nice wide round circle for his head. And then the last part, I'm going to go right here to the back, and I'm going to draw a straight long line for his tail. So you'll notice it is a very long tail. It comes right straight back. It's almost like you could draw a straight line from the front of his head all the way to the end of his tail. So I'm drawing that straight line. Later we'll turn it into some tail feathers. Now the next part of our scrub jay is to draw a line for his beak. So you'll see that the first line I'm going to be drawing is the middle line right here that separates the top of his beak from the bottom of his beak. So I'm just going to come right here to the front, and I'm going to draw a line that comes out. And it doesn't matter what direction you make that line. It can be pointing this way or up in the air, just depends on which way you're going to make his head. And I'm going to make sure that that line is fairly long. As a matter of fact, if you look at his beak is almost the same exact length as his head. It's a pretty long beak. So from the tip of his beak to the end of his beak is this long. And if I place this pencil right here, you'll see that his head is almost the same exact length. So when you're drawing his beak, you can take your fingers and place them on the beak line and then place your fingers here and make sure that they're about the same length. I might need to lengthen my beak just a tiny bit more. All right, now we're going to start with the top of the beak. So we're going to start right here at the end and we're going to just slightly curve it up. Remember, we want to make that beak a little bit wide on the top. And then I'm going to go underneath here and draw the underside of his beak. And I'm going to do the same thing and bring it back. Now I'm going to be curving my mouth up slightly right here in the center, just so he looks a little bit happier. Do you have to do that? No, I'm just making my bird a little bit more happy. I'm going to continue the beak to the back. So what I'm going to do is round this line right here and connect it, because the beak actually extends all the way back to here. You see that? It comes all the way back to here. Now there's a little bump right here where this head connects to the beak. And then this is a smooth line that curves around and connects to the body. You can see that right here. That's all I'm doing. And then I'm going to follow the same thing here. I'm going to make sure that this is rounded, and then I'm going to connect this down to the body. You'll see that his chest kind of comes out a little bit. So if you want to make him a little bit chubbier down here, you can. So I'm just going to curve my body around a little fatter. You might already have a nice fat circle. I just want mine a little bit chubbier. There we go. Now the next part is to go right up here to this back side. We're going to add a little bit harder line, and we're going to start to make his wing. So I'm just going to go like this and darken that line. And then right here where this circle connects to the oval of his body, I'm going to go right about here, and I'm just going to round a curve that comes up and around and back. So this is going to be his wing. Now you might notice that our scrub jay has a section of feathers right here. See the blue, and it's separated from the gray. So in order to make that a little bit more strong, I'm just going to draw a line like this to remind me I want to make this part blue and that part back here is going to be gray. Now the gray feathers, if you see right here, there's a little section right up at the top. So I'm just going to go like this and take part of the wing and split it by making a line. That way I'll remember to color that part gray and this part will be blue. And then I'm going to erase all of this section in here. We don't need this anymore. So I'm going to take my magic rubber eraser and pull out my pencil lines. I'm going to erase this line down here inside of his belly because I don't need that anymore. I'm going to also erase this line inside of his wing because I don't need that anymore. Okay, now we're going to go in and we're going to draw the outline of his tail feathers. So if you notice here, it looks like he only has one tail feather, but that's just because his feathers in the photograph look like this. If he was to tilt his feathers just slightly, you would see more of the tail feathers. We're just seeing it from this angle. So we're going to fluff up his tail feathers a little bit more and give him a few more tail feathers at the back. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend this line here, just like this one I drew here. I think I'm going to bring his tail a little bit longer, and I'm going to bring it out and loop it around and connect it at the end. So that's tail feather number 1. And I'm going to add another one, tail feather number 2. I just added another line. And maybe a third and a fourth, just so he has a little bit fluffier tail. Now on his wing, you'll see that he's got these long feathers here, and then he has this little section right here of shorter feathers. He has another section of short feathers here. So first, in this section right here, we can just go like this and make a few little marks to remind us later that we're going to mark that with our marker. And then these wing feathers are much longer. So now we can go in and do exactly what we did with the tail feathers. And we're just going to add a few lines, the length of his wings like that. Our next part of our scrub jay is this section right here. I think I talked to you a little bit earlier about that he has a necklace. This part of his coloring is called his blue necklace. So we want to add that necklace. Now you'll notice he's got a white chest right here. So part of his face is going to be white and part of his chest is going to be white. So right here, I'm just going to kind of draw a little curve. I'm going to draw another curve next to it like this. And that's going to remind me, I want to color that section blue later. And all this back here will be white. Now let's work on his eye. So if you find the middle line from your beak, we're going to come back and we're going to draw his eye just above that middle line. So if you look here, here's his middle line of his beak. His eye is right above that middle line of his beak. So here's the middle line. I'm going to go right above it and I'm going to draw his eye. Now I made him look a little happier. I gave him a little bit of a lower eyelid like this. And I opened his eye up a little wider this way. I'm going to add a half circle in there for his iris. And I'm going to add one more half circle in here for his pupil. And then later we'll go in and color this all in with our marker. Okay, next comes his band of gray feathers that wrap around his eye. It almost looks like he has a mask on. Do you see that? So I'm going to take my pencil. I'm going to start right here at the beak and I'm going to bring it close to his front of his eye. I'm going to loop it back and down. And it's not going to go all the way to the bottom because you'll notice he's got some white underneath his chin. So I'm just going to loop it all the way back and connect it to the beak. So it's kind of like a little circle that wraps around his eye. This section is going to be white. And then we've got that blue part of his feathers here. So this part has to come up and connect here. So all of this is going to be blue. This will be gray. That'll be white. So that's going to be his little necklace part in here. I'm going to erase that part. That makes it more, that little section right here will be blue, white, gray, gray, blue, and his tummy will be white. His feathers will be white. I mean blue, I'm sorry. Now let's work on his feet. All right, let's look at the back of his body. You'll notice his legs are toward the bottom lower area of his body, way back here. His feet aren't directly underneath him. They're kind of pushed back toward the back. So I'm going to make sure that I make his feet coming out, his leg coming from here. Also, I want you to notice that his legs bend opposite of the direction our legs bend. His knees are on the back side here, where our knees face forward and our legs bend this way. So we need to make a backwards L. It's going to kind of look like a number 7 when we're drawing it. So first thing we're going to do is draw a number 7. So I'm going to come right back here. I'm going to draw a short line this direction. and then a longer line coming forward. I'm going to match it by doing the same thing one more time, a short line and another long line. So that's his first leg. That's the one here. Then we're going to draw another leg behind that. This one's going to be in the distance, it's in the back side of him. I'm going to do the same thing. So this line is going to be a tiny bit shorter than this one. And then forward, same thing again. All right, now we're going to come down. We're going to draw 1 foot at a time. We're going to do this section with his feet. So if we look at his feet, which are slightly hidden in this photograph, he has 3 toes facing forward, and then he has 1 toe that hangs behind. So I'm going to come right here to the front, that top line. I'm going to draw 1 curving long toe. And then here on this section here, I'm going to bring it, curve it a little bit this way. And then I'm going to curve this line here. So these are 2 toes. We need 1 more in the middle. So I'm just going to draw 1 extra line here. And all we have to do now is make each one of these toes pointed and connect to the next toe. So I'm going to start down here. This will be the first toe. And I'm just going to curve it around and bring it back. I'm going to curve this one around and bring it back. And now that toe is hidden behind this toe. Foot number 1 done. Let's do the same thing on this side. Oops, I forgot his back toe. So I didn't draw his back toe, but if you want to add his little back toe, you can go like this and add a little back toe in the back. Now let's draw the other foot. So I'm going to curve the bottom of the foot here. The top of the foot's going to go up and around. That's toe number 1. Toe number 2. And toe number 3. So those are my 3 toes. I'm going to connect the first toe. Once you make the first one, the rest are easy. This one's going to come back and touch the first toe. My third toe is going to come back and touch the second toe. Once again, if you want to add that little back toe, you can. You don't have to. If you are adding it, you can erase the little back of his foot right here. In this picture, I did not draw his back toe, but you can. It makes it look even more real. Now, he looks kind of strange because his feet are clamped around, but you can't see what he is standing on. We need to draw a branch for our scrub jay to be standing on. So in my backyard, he would be standing on an oak tree. This is a juniper tree. This is another tree that our scrub jays love because they love these juniper berries. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here. I can start right at the back of his foot here, and I'm going to bring this line off the edge of the paper. Then I'm just going to continue this line through his foot. So I'm just kind of pretending I'm drawing through his foot. And I'm going to come out this side. We'll add some more branches to this tree later. I'm just going to draw the main branch first. Now you can decide how thick you want that branch that he is standing on. So there's your main branch. That's like this photo here. Now we can draw the little side branches off to the side. Now I don't want to draw a branch right behind his head here because I feel like that's going to kind of compete with my drawing. So I'm going to instead just draw it a little higher up here. So you can decide where you want that branch to go, and you're just going to make a line. And then remember, the branches are going to be a little wider here, and they're going to come back to a point. So whatever you do, no matter how you make that branch, it just needs to get thinner as it gets to the end. I'm going to draw another little branch coming off to the side here. And maybe a little mini branch here. Okay, so there's my little branches for my tree. I will add the pine needles later. And if you would like to add a branch coming from the upper corner here, that would be another fun place. So you can even extend a branch coming down here. Coming from the other corner, because I've got a big space up there. I'm going to add a little mini branch. Remember, your branches always get skinnier as they come to the tip. And the last thing I forgot to add right back here is his underpants. Yes, that's actually what they're called, underpants, right here. There's a little section of feathers that wraps around the top of his legs, and they call it his underpants. So I'm going to add a little bit of curved feathers right there, and then his legs are hidden underneath that part of the underpants. Let's move on now to getting our Sharpie marker, and we're going to go in and we're going to use our Sharpie marker to outline all these lines. And we're going to do it a little bit at a time. So don't pause your video quite yet. I really want you to walk along this process with me, and that way we can make our bird look even more real. For instance, we're going to be making some scratchy little lines that make it look a little bit more like real feathers. All right, let's begin first with the top of his head. So he's got that little bump right here. And then we're going to trace the top of his head. This part is just like how we drew it. However, we're not going to trace that hard line. You'll notice that the feathers are very soft here. So we don't want to draw a big hard line there. Instead, I'm just going to kind of scratch my marker very softly down the side like this. See, that's going to look a little bit more soft and feathery. I'm going to do the same thing on this line. I'm just going to soften that line up. And then I'm going to do the underside of his chin, and I'm going to make it a little bit more curved when I draw it. So I'm just going to go right here, softly curve it. And when I get down here at the bottom, I'm going to add a little bit of softer feathers. I'm not going to make a hard line there. So I'm just going to kind of get just a little softer. Now I'm going to come up to his top part here where his wing is. So this part is shorter feathers. I'm just going to make them look a little bit softer. And then he's got that long feathers for his wings. And I'm going to outline those. And when I draw his tail feathers back here, those are long tail feathers. So his tail has to be very long. He uses this for balance. If you actually see scrub jays, they look like they're kind of hunched over. They don't sit up very straight. They are more this direction. They're kind of bent with their kind of head tucked down. It's just their posture. They hold their posture very different than other birds. I'm going to kind of feather up his little underpants. Then I'm going to outline his leg. I'm going to round that back part right there where his little knee is. His knee is backwards than ours. It's more like our elbow. I'm going to outline his toes. And if you don't like the way your feet turned out on your bird, don't worry about it. You could cover it up. You could put some pine needles over it later. So even if you didn't like it, you could just add another branch right here and put some pine needles kind of brushing over the top of them. I hide a lot of things in my drawings when I don't like the way they turn out. That's what I do. Okay, let's go up to his beak now. So I'm going to start with that center line. I'm going to curve mine up slightly, just a little bit, so he looks a little happier. I'm going to trace the top of his beak and the bottom of his beak. And then I'm going to work on this feathery part right here. Now, I'm not going to be making the line hard. I'm going to kind of make it a little softer by brushing my marker. See, I kind of like tick it, tick, 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 tick around. I'm going to outline his eye. Don't color anything in yet, just trace it. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit for his eye. When I'm tracing his eye, I'm going to trace this line here. That'll be his iris. That would be the colored part of his eye. Then I'm going to trace this line here. That's going to be his pupil. Now, I like to leave a little shiny light in the eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to darken that circle once or twice and still leave a little bit of light at the very top. So he has a little sparkle in his eye. If you filled it in, that is absolutely okay. All right, Scrub Jay is done. Now our next part is to outline our tree. So I'm just gonna kind of trace along the branch. I'm gonna skip over that branch for now. And I don't want my branch to look too perfect. So I'm gonna kind of wobble my line a little bit as I trace down. I don't want it to look just so perfect. Now when I'm tracing the branches that go off to the side, I'm going to make sure those come to a little point. And then I'm going to move on to my final branch up at the top. And I'm not really worried about the lines being perfect. It's just a tree. Now I like to then take my marker and run a couple long lines down the entire length of the branch, so it kind of looks like wood grain. All right, that's looking pretty good. I think I forgot to go in and ink in a few of these little marks just to remind me that those are the shorter feathers. And then there's another little section of feathers here I noticed in the photo. Look right here. See, he has kind of a little bit of softer feathers under here. If you want to add those, you can. You do not have to, but if you want to just add a few little marks like this, you can add those. All right. Finally, we're going to decide what type of pine needles we're going to be putting on our tree. So you can make short, little stubby branches like this. This is our juniper, and it would be very short. So you'd just be taking your marker and making quick little short lines. Or you can do a pine tree like this. I'm going to be doing a pine tree. And the way I do that is I first decide where I'm going to start that little pine needle bunch. I make a little bump, and then I'm just going to go right up here, draw a small little stem, and from here I'm just going to take my marker and flick it. So let's make another one right here. So I'm just going to make a little mark where I want to start it, and I'm just going to shoot out these little lines. We'll add some color to them later. I'm going to put another one on this one. And then over here, this one, let's see, I can add one here. These are going to add some pretty color to my picture too. Now, go ahead and close up your marker, get your magic rub eraser. Go ahead, pause the video, erase all your pencil lines, and then meet me back here. Now, before you start erasing, remember our trick. We keep our hand on our paper like this. We erase in the duck's mouth. So go ahead, pause the video, meet me back here when you are done. Welcome back. Let's get ready to work on our painting or coloring, depending upon what you're going to be using. I'm going to be using watercolor paints. I'm also going to be getting my water cup ready. I'm just using a little jar that has water in it. You can use a mug, a cup, whatever doesn't tip over. First thing we're going to be doing is wetting the colors that we think we're going to be using today. So let's put our picture out and decide what we're going to be needing. First color I see, of course, is blue. This is a blue colored bird, our scrub jay. I have two different shades of blue. So I'm going to be dropping little drops of water into my paint to start to wake it up. You'll notice I'm not stirring my brush. I'm literally setting the brush right over and letting the water drip into my paint. Now, if you only have one shade of blue in your paint set, that's fine. What other color do you think we're going to be needing? We're going to be needing gray. Now, I obviously don't have gray paint, but I do have black. So I'm going to put a little bit of water in my black. We're not going to be needing a lot. So I'm just going to put 2 drops of water in my black. I don't need very much today. Another color I'm going to be needing for my scrub jay is, let's see, gray, blue, black. Well, we already used our black with our marker. Oh, what about the branch? Branch is brown. So we're going to need some water on our brown. And for the pine needles, or the different types of leaves that you are making on yours, you're going to need green. Now I have 2 shades of green in my set, but you might only have 1 color, and that is fine. Now, one trick that I like to do when I'm doing any type of wood is I like to use more than 1 color brown. So what I do is I add orange or yellow to my brown when I'm painting it. So I'm going to add a little water to my yellow and a little water to my orange. And I'm going to experiment with those colors later when I'm making my wood. All right, now those are going to let that water kind of sit in my paint set. And the first thing we're going to work on is painting our beautiful scrub jay's beak. The first color we're going to work with is gray. So gray is a very, very light color. So what we're going to be doing is we're not going to be dipping our brush into the black and starting right away to paint. We're instead going to use the lid of our paint set, and we're going to drop some water on our lid. So I'm putting a couple drops of water on my lid. Let me zoom in so you can see me do this. There, so I'm going to put a little bit of water in my lid. And I'm going to add 1 drop of blue into my water. Swirl that around. So I have a really, really watery blue color. And then I'm going to add 1 drop of black. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to take my brush and dip it in the water just a little bit, and then drop that little bit of black into that watery blue. So I should have a very light color of gray. Now I can always make it darker, but it's much harder to make it lighter. So I want to try to test that color out and see if I like it. So I'm going to come over here to my beak. I'm going to tap my brush first on my napkin so it's not too much liquid. And I'm going to see if I like that color. Okay, it looks very pretty, but it's kind of light. Do you see how light it is? So I'm going to add another drop of black paint. Just put a drop into my watery blue. Just stir it around. And I'm going to see if this color is a little better. I'm going to tap it on my napkin. I always tap it first before I start to paint. And then I'm going to test it out again. Okay, that looks a little better. It's not quite so light, but it's not too dark. I think I'm going to like that color. Now, while I have that gray in my brush, I'm going to also go back and I'm going to paint his legs. So I'm going to come right up here. I'm going to always tap my brush on my napkin before I paint. That part is really important. So I'm going to put my napkin up here where you can see it so that you see how often I tap my brush when I'm working. I don't just go straight in with the paint. I tap it on my napkin. That gets rid of that first big glob of paint on my brush. Now I'm going to paint those legs with this pale gray. And paint his toes. Now, if your color is a lot darker than mine, don't worry. You can always wipe your color away. Let me show you a trick. So if you, let's say you made your color and it's too dark and it's like, let me put some too much color here. Let's say you made it this dark. Now watch this trick. I wash my brush and I dry it really well on my napkin. And then I can take my brush and I can scoop up the color like a little sponge and wipe it on my napkin. See, I just pulled all that color that was too dark right off my paper. So anytime you make too dark of a color on your picture, you can wipe it off with a dry paintbrush. So wipe your paintbrush, clean it first, wipe it off, and then you can go right in and take that color away. So if you have a big old puddle, let's say you messed up your beak and you're like, oh no, he's got a big black beak. You can tap your brush, nice and clean, scoop it up by just tapping it. See how I pulled it right out? Wipe it on my napkin, he's good to go. All right, so we're going to let that dry. Now we're going to work on another part that needs to be gray, and that is this little section of feathers on the back. So I'm going to grab some more of that gray paint water that's in the lid of my paint set. So unfortunately, my paint lid is clear, so you can't really see what I'm grabbing, but I'm grabbing that paint water. I'm going to go right up here. I'm going to paint this gray. If I need to make more gray paint water, I can make some more by adding a little bit more black to it. And if it's getting too dark, I can add more water. If I need to add a little bit more blue to it to kind of change the color, the shade of gray, I can do that. If I add just a little bit more blue to it, watch this. I can change the color. It's still gray, but it has a little hint of blue in it. That's kind of pretty. Now the other part of our scrub jay that is gray is around his eye. So I'm going to grab a little bit more paint water, and I got to be really careful because I don't want to get it in his eye. So what I'm going to do is tap it with my napkin first, and then very carefully go in and paint his feathers around his eye. That's that little patch. Now, if I want to make it darker, I can add a little bit more, but I don't want to leave any big puddles. So you just want to work a little bit at a time. All right, I'm going to let that dry. And I can pick up those puddles by tapping my brush on the napkin and going in and pulling out those big puddles. All right, so I'm gonna let that dry. And now we're gonna move on to the next color. And the next color we're gonna work with is blue. So I have two different shades of blue. So I'm gonna start with my lighter shade of blue first. And I'm gonna start by painting right here, his head. So this section of his head goes all the way down to his beak. And then down this little section, remember that's called his necklace. It's a blue necklace. That's the blue section of feathers that runs along his chest. The next part of our scrub jay that is blue is his wings. So I'm just going to grab a little bit more of that paint water. Now, if I get too much color, all I have to do is scoop up that color and use it in another area. His tail is also blue, so I'm going to take that color and extend it all the way back to his tail. I'm going to grab this color up and paint it along here. My best recommendation when painting is to not use too much paint. You can always go back in and add a second coat if you want it brighter. It's better to use less paint. Remember, this is called watercolor paint. That means you should be painting with water. You should be able to see through your paint so that we can see your drawing underneath. We don't want to just grab a big dark glob of the color and paint it on. It'll be too dark and we won't be able to see that beautiful drawing that we drew underneath. So if this happens to you, that means you need to add another scoop of water to your paint set. And if you have a glob of paint that's too dark, remember you can scoop it up and use it in another area. So I'm going to use that same color and brush it over my tail feathers. I could scoop up a little bit more and I could brush some back over here on his feathers around his chest. That's his necklace. I could scoop up a little bit more and add another layer to the top of his head. I could scoop up a little bit more and brush it along the whole edge of his wing. There we go. And when you're finished with your blue, if you have two shades of blue, you could now go in and add a little bit of the dark blue. So I have some dark blue or darker blue. It's kind of more of a royal blue in my paint set. So I'm going to first tap my brush on my napkin. I don't want to have too much paint or liquid on my brush. And I'm going to go in and take this color and brush a few bits of this darker blue on my wing and on my tail. And when I add that color, it's kind of pretty next to my light blue, those two colors together. I'm going to add a little bit here. Ooh, I think I got a little bit too much liquid. I can just wipe it on my brush. I think he's looking pretty good. All right, the next part of our scrub jay is he has a tiny bit of flecks of gray Do you see that? You see that really light gray here and here, and a little bit of spots of light gray here. So what I can do is go back to my original puddle of gray in my lid. You can see it right there. And I'm going to add a little bit more water. I'm going to make some more gray water. So I'm going to add a little bit more water here, stir that around. I'm going to add a hint of blue to it first. And I don't want it very dark, so I'm just going to use a tiny bit of black. I want this color kind of light. I'm going to tap my brush on my napkin, and then I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to make a few little tick marks with this gray. Now, I don't know whether you can see that on my camera, so I'm going to zoom in and see if that's showing up at all. There you go. I think you can see that okay. So I'm just going in, and I'm just making some quick little tap marks. You can make as many as you want, just to kind of break up that bright white. And while my brush is almost dry, I can go in and paint this iris right here if I want to. You could add a little color. You don't have to, but you can. You could put a little bit of gray in his eye. I'm going to zoom out now. Guess what? Our scrub jay is done. Now the next thing we're going to do is, I wanted to add a second coat of gray around his eye. I was waiting to do that until my first coat dried. So I'm going to darken it by just adding one more coat on his beak too. And one more coat on those gray feathers on his back. Okay, now let's move on to our branch. So I told you earlier, I put some yellow, I put some water in my yellow, some water in my orange. So I'm going to first start with yellow, and I'm just going to brush some of that yellow water along my branch, just a couple places. I'm going to put some yellow water on these little short branches. And then I'm going to add orange next. So I'm going to put my brush in my orange paint. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to brush a few strokes of orange on my branch. Oops, got a little bit on over there. Now, to show you how I clean that up, I wash my brush out, tap it on the napkin until it's clean, and I can pull that orange pretty close right out of his toe. There we go. All right, now, once I get some orange on my branch, now my last color I'm going to put in is my brown. And I don't want to use a thick coat of brown. I'm just going to run my brush along that water that's floating on the top. And I'm going to slowly kind of control my brush all the way from one end to the other. I'm going to hop over his foot, grab a little bit more paint. I don't want my color too dark, that's why I add the water. And you'll see that the brown changes color as it touches the orange and as it touches the yellow. I'm going to wait and do the in between his toes in just a second. Let me finish this big part of the branch. Look at how pretty that is. When my branch is done, now I can go in with a little bit more brown. I'm going to tap it on my napkin so I don't have too much, and I'm going to go in there and paint in between his toes. There we go. All right, next we're going to paint those little skinny branches the same way we did the big branches. Just run a little bit of color along the branches. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay if you go off the line. I'm going off the line. No one's going to look at it and say anything about that. And then our final part is to add our beautiful pine needles. So for our pine needles, we can go in and take our green. You know, I have two shades of green, so I'm going to add a little bit more water to my light green. And I'm just going to go and tap my brush, always tapping my brush before I start so I don't have too much paint. And I'm just going to brush some light green. I'm going to do that on each one of those little clusters of pine needles. And then once my light green has dried, then I can go in and try a little bit dark green. Now, if you don't have dark green, you could add a little bit of blue to your green paint, mix it together in your lid, and you can make a different shade of green by doing that. It'll be a pretty kind of a emerald green or blue green. And that is another way that you can make it. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm going to always tap my brush on my napkin first before I start because I don't want to have too much paint. Kind of holding my brush straight up and down, and I'm just flicking it. And one coat of the paint is pretty much all you need to do all of those. And when you're all finished with your picture, if you want to paint a blue sky, you could put a blue sky behind, or you could go in with a crayon that's unwrapped, and you could use the side of a crayon and color the sky blue if you'd like to do that, or you can leave it just the way it is. I hope you had fun learning how to make a Western California scrub jay with me today, and I look forward to teaching you another lesson next time. I'll see you next video.